Hey, it's Jordan. Delighted to be joined by Ben Cohen, co-founder of Ben and Jerry's, and I would say one of the few genuine corporate responsible citizens in this country. Ben, honored to speak with you. Ben and Jerry's has been very, very outspoken for many, many years on progressive causes, getting money out of politics, and definitely racial equality, as well as diminishing the harm of police brutality, mass incarceration. And recently, I think your corporation came out with the strongest statement, taking on white supremacy itself in response to the heinous murder of George Floyd. Can you kind of talk about what sparked that strong statement by Ben and Jerry's, and also kind of decades of activism, particularly in the area of racial inequality?
I think that, as our business got larger and larger, Jerry and I came to realize that business is really the most powerful force in our society. And that if we were going to right some of the wrongs that are oppressing all of us, really, business needs to make its voice heard. At the beginning, as Ben and Jerry's was starting to get well known, the media would want to talk to me, do interviews, whatever. And I felt like it was my responsibility to use that platform to work for justice. It's always struck me as hugely unfair that people in our country and around the world are screwed just because they happen to be born on the wrong side of some imaginary line. And where, people in this country, if they're born into a poor neighborhood, they got shitty schools, they got shitty healthcare, they got shitty housing, and virtually no jobs. And they're on the receiving end of police brutality. And people around the world, if they happen to be born in the wrong country, they're on the receiving end of our bombs. And all these people that are on the receiving end, that are being killed, brutalized, tortured, it's being done in our name and with our money. And to me, there's no choice but to work to end that injustice.
And I always call it the United Corporations of America, which says it all. But you see right now companies like General Motors coming out with statements, and we're going to come up with special boards to look at racial issues. Walmart, other companies, but the economic matter is General Motors treats poor workers the wrong way, minority workers the wrong way, sending their jobs offshore, setting bidding wars between temporary workers and full-time workers. Many of these companies making statements right now are kind of cogs in the machine of this racial oppression. But Ben and Jerry's has kind of put their money where their mouth is. Can you kind of talk about the things you've done? I know you, decades ago, started getting part of your ice cream from vendors that didn't have background checks, for example, for their workers. Many of their workers might have been formerly incarcerated workers, things like that. Kind of talk about why it was important to you to kind of put your money where your mouth is.
Well, it's just about justice and about realizing that business is really nothing more than a rich, powerful neighbor. And if you see injustice in your community, I think you have three choices. You can either ignore it, you can complain about it, or you can do something about it. And for me, it's always, it's always made a lot more sense to do something about it. Yeah, we have worked hard to try to integrate our progressive values into the way we run our business on a day-to-day basis. And so that's what led us to form a partnership with Grayston Bakery, located in inner city New York, whose purpose is to provide jobs for formerly incarcerated people or formerly homeless or people who had problems with drugs previously. And they're the guys who make all the brownies for our ice creams. So yeah, we try to find suppliers like that. I mean, we try really hard to buy chocolate in a way that's not supporting slave labor, and just trying to integrate as much of a social concern into our day-to-day business as possible. Business, it's kind of like people are saying now, they're saying it now, but it was always true. I mean, it's not possible to be not a racist. You can either be a racist or an anti-racist. And Ben and Jerry's is, I think from the very beginning, Jerry and I wanted to create a company that would be run the way regular, everyday people on the street would like to see a company run. And the way they want to see it run is a company that cares about other people and uses its enormous power not just in its own self-interest, that uses its enormous power to address some of the social problems that face us. And, at the beginning, all these experts and business pundits and, the accountants, the lawyers, were all saying, you're crazy. You're going to go out of business. It's not possible for a business to help solve social problems and make a profit at the same time. And I think what Ben & Jerry's has proven is that that's just a bunch of bullshit. It's just a bunch of self-serving bullshit. Yeah, you can do both things. You can find a way to do business that meets the needs of the community, especially those that have been oppressed economically and racially, and you can make a profit at the same time. Business in Congress, there's 11,000 lobbyists hanging out in D.C., all paid for by business. Business spends $3 billion a year on lobbying. And it's all in the narrow self-interest of business to pass laws that benefit business many times at the expense of everybody else. And I think today, in this crisis, business has got to finally step up to the table. And, what drives all of us crazy is that we see these videos of unarmed African-American people getting murdered by the police over and over and over again, and the policemen that are responsible for it always, just about always get off scot-free. Mm-hmm. They're either not prosecuted or they're not convicted, and the reason for it is a Supreme Court ruling that's known as qualified immunity. It's a bunch of legal mumbo jumbo, but essentially that's what results in police getting off when they've murdered somebody. And that ruling needs to be overturned, to lobby to get that law changed, instead of continuing to say nice things and then behind the scenes lobby for their own narrow self-interest at the expense of everybody else. If they decided that, yes, we really believe what we're saying and we are going to use our power, we could overturn that law and it would be a done deal.
You know, you definitely campaigned hard for Bernie Sanders twice, and it isn't lost on me. I've been covering these protests as well as covering the coronavirus. Right now, obviously, people are out specifically for Black Lives Matter, but there's a lot of people I'm talking to at these protests that are talking about a lot of the things Bernie spoke about. The fact that they are, working 2 to 3 jobs, that they are paid less than, if I'm speaking with black people, their white counterparts. A lot of animosity towards the fact that, we have this pandemic, but we got a $1,200 check, that a boy, and not much more relief. And now you're starting to see little snippets in the media. New York Times columnist Charles Blow tweeted out yesterday, the transformational changes that COVID, the economic crisis, police brutality, and racial turbulence will force are precisely some of the things Bernie was talking about, but may have sounded too extreme to some just months ago. Another columnist talked about, Michelle Alexander, the fact that millennial African Americans just aren't buying what the Democratic Party is selling, and that's why they were really gravitating to Bernie. Can you kind of talk about all the holes we're seeing in our system right now, brought by the COVID pandemic and, frankly, the Band-Aid that was provided by Congress to a gunshot wound, and now, 400 years of sin spilling out into the streets. Can you kind of talk about, is this showing that the things that Bernie and progressives have been talking about are not radical, they're necessary?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, Bernie and a whole bunch of other people have been fighting for health care for all for decades. When you talk about security, providing the task of a nation to provide security for its people, number one is probably health care. It's an abomination that the U.S. is the only major country in the world that doesn't provide health care for all of its people. We have allowed the politicians and the Pentagon and the police to define security in terms of killing, in terms of weapons, when the reality is that security is education, it's healthcare, it's food, it's housing. And, I think a lot of people can't really understand that because they've got security. They take that as a granted. Of course, I've got health insurance. Of course, I got a decent house. Of course, I went to decent public schools. So what more do I need for security? Well, I need to defend myself from, criminals, people out there. But, the people out there they're you and me. They're fathers, mothers, sons, daughters, brothers, sisters. And I don't want my money spent killing people like me. And it's always it's always a no-win situation. I mean, if you look at the U.S. spends more money on our Pentagon than the next 12 countries combined, and most of those are allies. I mean, when you compare you know, I mean, the idea that there's countries, what we're defending the United States. I mean, do we really think that some other country, China, Russia, is trying to invade us? I mean, that's absurd. I mean, the U.S. is the biggest military power in the world. We can't even successfully occupy Iraq. uh, no country wants to invade us. It's absurd. I mean, what countries want is fairness. They want to be, they don't want the whole world run for the benefit of the United States.
And
It's
most
fairness.
and most
Yeah.
just want us to leave them the hell alone.
Exactly. Exactly.
And my last question, I read that early years of Ben and Jerry's, you were kind of feeling stifled and thinking of selling because you just felt like you had become all the things you disdained, like your average cardboard cutout businessman. But then you got good advice. Well, make change, be different. Maybe to people watching that are small business owners or entrepreneurs, what would be your advice to people that are getting the same crappy advice you got back in the day? You can't do this. You can't speak out loudly. You'll be boycotted. You'll be this. You'll be that. You'll be dead in the water if you try to be a corporate activist. Can you kind of take people back to your experience then when you were kind of feeling like you could not, do the activism you wanted as a business owner?
Yeah. At the time, Jerry and I had only planned on becoming one little homemade ice cream parlor in an old gas station. And as the business started getting larger and larger, we took out bank loans, and most of what we were doing was working to repay the bank. And we looked around at what we realized that we were moving away from being ice cream men, people who make ice cream and scoop ice cream, to people on the other side of the counter, to becoming bosses and employers and dealing with accountants and lawyers and hiring and firing and writing memos and all that stuff. And it wasn't what we planned on, and we felt like we were becoming just another cog in the economic machine that tends to oppress a lot of people. That it has negative effects on the environment. It has negative effects on the community as a whole. It exploits employees, and we were ready to sell the business. And then I ran into this old eccentric restaurateur who told me, Ben, I mean, the business has so much potential. I mean, if there's something you don't like about business, why don't you just change it? And that was when we decided to conduct this experiment and see if it were possible for a business to proactively address issues in the society and make a profit at the same time. And I want to be clear. I mean, a lot of people think about, responsible business as not having a negative effect. I mean, it's that same, either you're a racist or an anti-racist thing. It's not, being benign is not enough. Mm-hmm. We need to proactively be reparative. We need to repair the damage that's happened over so many years. And, like I say, everybody told us we were going to fail. We figured, well, we'll do this experiment. We'll probably fail, but, we'll try. And there's a spiritual aspect to business, just as there is to the lives of individuals. As you give, you receive. As you help others, you're helped in return. As your business supports the community supports your business. I don't know if you can prove it, but it's just the way the world works. And certainly Ben and Jerry's is living proof of it. So there, I mean, most businesses, well, just about all businesses are political. They're very political. They they expend all these resources on trying to influence laws and legislation and elections in their favor. But they try to do that covertly. Mm-hmm. They try to do it in a way that nobody sees. They put out their nice big statements. And the big change for Ben and Jerry's was that we decided we're going to use our power in the interest of the community in general, and we're going to do it overtly. And it's fine. It works pretty well.
I would say so. Thank you, Ben. I appreciate your talking to me, your activism, and your ice cream. It's been many good nights for me.
All right.
Thank you, Ben.
All right, let's get licking.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.